Classic Reviews are back, folks. Back with a screaming vengeance, as I'm going to cover a band that I have not once talked about on my channel. I am Midnight Strike 3625, and today we're going to be covering some Led Zeppelin. And there's a lot of reasons why I haven't talked about Led Zeppelin much on my channel, because I was mainly focusing on metal reviews, and things that are a little bit newer and edgier than the classics, such as AC/DC and Bon Jovi and the like, but I've talked about it a little bit here and there, just not as much for Led Zeppelin, if at all. So today we're going to rectify that and talk about Led Zeppelin 2. Which is my absolute favorite album by Led Zeppelin. It is an absolute classic as well as an absolute masterpiece. It might not be the most technical album out there, it might not be the most well-produced album, but for its time, it was definitely a gem and a needle in a haystack when it came to really good music of the 1960s, at least in my opinion. Now, I am not too much for the Beatles. I like a lot of the Stones, but they started to sort of wane off after a little while for me. But Led Zeppelin is a band that I could always get into, especially their first 4 albums. Of those first 4, of course, this is my absolute favorite. Led Zeppelin 2 has so many different classics, so many different memorable guitar riffs, and it's an improvement on its predecessor in virtually every way. None of the songs pass 6.5 minutes, and it's all the better for it, because each song is tightly crafted, being as long as it needs to be without feeling like there's too much dead space and not a lot going on, which was a recurring theme in their first album with songs like How Many More Times and Baby I'm Gonna Leave You, where it just felt like there really wasn't a lot going on. Dazed and Confused had a little bit of that going on too, but as that is one of my favorite songs, I don't really hold it against that song too much. But as far as what's on here, the offering of 9 songs, you got Whole Lotta Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, you got the Lemon Song, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Ramble On, Livin' Lovin' Made, and of course, Moby Dick and Bring It On Home. This album has some of the absolute classics, the essentials, as you would say, from Led Zeppelin. This one and Led Zeppelin 4 have just pretty much all the essentials that you need from Led Zeppelin, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 songs, in my opinion. I have a pretty hardcore bias for their first 4 albums, I will admit that much, but as far as this one goes, the only downside that I can really say is in the cases of the songs What Is and What Should Never Be, Thank You, and the Lemon Song. Thank You, in my opinion, was probably the weakest track on the album. The album didn't really need it. I guess they were trying to appeal to a broader audience by throwing a ballad in there, but it just felt like it drug on for far too long and didn't really have a lot of substance to it. The guitars are alright. It's kind of a calming and a soothing melody. The lyrics are decent, but it just doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the album, in my opinion. Now, What Is and What Should Never Be is a very good song, but again, it feels like it just kind of drones on a little bit. I really like the chorus, and other than that, there's not really a lot to say about it. It's a classic song, so don't hate, I guess. Come at me with your pitchforks for giving my critique of it. I do like the song, but after a certain point, it just feels like it's a little bit too slow. Other than that, some of my favorites on the album are Whole Lotta Love, Heartbreaker, Ramble On, Livin' Lovin' Made, and pretty much every other song aside from those 3 that I listed. The Lemon Song is another one that I hadn't talked about. It is 6 minutes and 20 seconds, I believe, and it doesn't feel like it drags on, and has a lot of cool tongue-in-cheek lyrics. However, it's just not really that interesting after you listen to it enough times in conjunction with the other songs. It doesn't really stand out as much, I will say, but the lyrics are good, and a lot of the guitar work is, well, it's as good as anything else on the album, I guess, but I digress. This album, all in all, it is an absolute classic. It's an essential for any fan of Led Zeppelin, in my opinion. If you don't have this album, Led Zeppelin 2, and you consider yourself a fan of Led Zeppelin, I would highly suggest and recommend that you go out and purchase this album. Led Zeppelin is one of the greats, especially with their first 4 albums, and to a minor extent, Houses of the Holy. I'm kind of warming up to Over the Hills and Far Away in the Ocean, but then again, I'm not really too big of a fan of Led Zeppelin's later works. I mean, I don't know what I can really say other than the fact that they tried to do too much. And then they went in a quasi-mainstream / experimental route where they just made a bunch of weird songs, I guess. Like Dire Maker, not really too big of a fan of that. Kashmir, just kind of, that one is just too long, in my opinion. But that is a different video for a different day. Overall, with this album, Led Zeppelin definitely earned their spot as one of the most legendary hard rock bands of all time, and this album earns a spot as one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time. I would give this one a 9.5 out of 10, and it definitely earns every last scrap of that. This is Midnight Strike 3625. I hope you enjoyed watching the return of the classic reviews. Keep calm and rock on.